Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's council meeting. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. The recording of the meeting will be available later on the council's YouTube channel. Further, under the local authorities executive arrangements, meetings and access to information, England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. Any councillor who wishes to speak should raise their hand and your request will be noted. You'll be asked to speak in turn by me and then you may turn on your microphone. Once you've finished speaking, would you please turn off your microphone? In respect of voting on any other item, when asked by me, councillors should raise their hand to indicate how they wish to vote. If a roll call is requested, councillors' names will be called out in turn. The councillor may raise a point of order or make a personal explanation at any time by raising their hand, and I'll hear them immediately, and my ruling on the matter will be final. I would now like to invite the leader to lead us in a minute's silence for Andrew Pegram.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd just like everybody to stand for a minute's silence for Mr. Andrew Pegram, who's a very dedicated and professional member of staff for Rushcliffe, and he'll be very, very sadly missed. And of course, we pass our most sincere condolences on to his family. So yeah, a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I would now like to welcome Jacqueline Swinburne from the Nottinghamshire Deaf Society to head us in a moment's reflection.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me here this evening for this moment of reflection. And really, I'm just going to talk about my personal life. I was born profoundly deaf to hearing parents, and this is the case for most deaf children. 80% are born to hearing parents. Only 20% of deaf children are born to deaf parents. I was brought up in an oral environment and I had to learn to lip read, and it was very isolating. It was very difficult for me as a child within the family and local neighbourhood. But I managed, and I went to 2 deaf schools, one here in Nottingham, which is now closed, unfortunately. About 200 deaf schools over the UK have closed over the years. So there's now only about 10 to 15 specialist schools remaining in the UK. A lot of this was linked to the Warnock report, which recommended mainstreaming for deaf children and disabled children, and it's been successful for some children but not for others. I was fortunate enough to be able to pass my 11 plus, and I went to the Mary Hare Grammar School in Newbury. Again, it was an oral school, a boarding school. But that was funded at the time by the Nottingham County Council, who funded me to go to that school. I'm married, I've got a family, I've got deaf children, I've got 3 deaf sons who have now grown up, 2 who went through a mainstream setting, 1 who didn't cope quite so well in mainstream and ended up in a residential setting, and also has some other sort of mental health issues. But he manages, and all of my boys manage to mix in society. But communication is key to deaf people. And over the years, technology has been a real boon to the deaf community. If you think now that we've got video calling, we've got smartphones, deaf people are able to text and call each other in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before. My role is I work at the Nottingham Deaf Society as a deaf link worker. I work with a lot of deaf people who have very low literacy skills. I do a lot of work translating documents for them and helping them with their everyday life skills, accessing the internet, working with our interpreting service, etc. And I love my job within the deaf community. I'm going to be retiring in a few years, but I've loved my opportunity to work within the deaf community. But I'd like to challenge you all really to think about communication and accessibility for a whole range of people, but particularly deaf people. How many sort of simple things such as intercoms on doors are just a barrier to the deaf community. But also when communicating, just to think of other ways and not to be put off, to use texting, to use pen and paper. I've learned to lip read to a certain extent, but I would like to ask the hearing community to meet me halfway, to think about my needs as a deaf person, to think about learning some basic sign language and some basic deaf awareness. So I'd like to challenge you with that, and thank you very much for inviting us here this evening. Because deaf people can't hear, this is how they show appreciation.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
You were very welcome tonight, and that was very interesting. If you'd like to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're very welcome to do so, but otherwise you're free to leave. I think. Thank you. Right, so we move to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Bansal, Councillor J. Stockwood, Councillor Mrs. Stockwood and Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Given the item at item 11, which references my ward, I will be declaring an interest. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to declare an interest in item 10, a non-pecuniary interest, and I won't take part in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, to approve a correct record of minutes of the meeting of the council on the 26th of May. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation to accept those minutes.
Councillor Edovie.
Yeah, I'd like to second the recommendation to accept the minutes.
All in favour? Anyone against? Well, that vote is carried. We now move to my announcements. Well, my year started off, as I keep telling everybody, with a bang. My first engagement was to invite our very own Rushcliffe Football Club back to Nottinghamshire. That is Nottingham Forest. I welcomed them on the balcony at the council house with red and white smoke and lots of ticker tape. I've got to tell you, it was incredibly exciting. There were 40,000 people there, and I showed the cup to them all. It was very exciting. More excitement, of course, I had with Jubilee street parties, picnics, beacons, judging fancy dress parades, best dressed pooches, you name it, and I was doing it over the Jubilee weekend. Once again, our very own Glastonbury musical. Family Fun Day was held in West Bridgeford to celebrate Armed Forces Day. Brilliant day out of wonderful music, culminating with the Queen tribute band. If anybody was there, it was amazing. All I can say is, what are you going to do next? Civic Services, I've attended a number of civic services at Southwell, including the Queen's Jubilee service, plus lunch in the Bishop's Palace. I've attended several armed forces events, beating the retreat at the Defence and Military Rehabilitation Centre at Stamford. Last weekend, the Mercian Regiment pilgrimage to Crutch Memorial. This is an amazing memorial and stands on a very steep hill. I warn you, it's a very steep hill in Derbyshire, overlooking 7 counties. I could, in fact, see right beyond the power station at Radcliffe-on-Trent, actually into Rushcliffe. The main treat of the day, though, was the flypast by the Lancaster. And again, because of the view from up there, we could actually see the Lancaster disappear towards the horizon to do yet another flypast somewhere. Absolutely amazing. There have been many, many more events that I've attended, opening of care homes, garden parties, and there are a lot more to come if you could see my diary. I could go on and on, but we have to get on with council business. So I now move us to the next item, which is number 5, and it's the leaders' announcements. Councillor Robinson.
Sorry to say, nothing as exciting as flying Lancasters. Relatively boring, I'm afraid. First of all, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to share with members and have our respects to Anthony May, Chief Executive of the County Council, who has announced that he's leaving the authority. I believe he's taken up his post in September, I think, at the Health Trust. He's been a great supporter of Rushcliffe. I know he's been a big asset to officers on some really challenging times through the pandemic, and particularly now as we've been developing the devolution. So I'd like, on behalf of really everybody in the chamber, just to wish Anthony all the very best going forward, and welcome whoever the new chief executive will be to the county council in the very near future. I'd also just like to talk about another announcement, which again is very important. The new chairman of the Freeport has now been announced, who's a lady by the name of Nora Senior, and she's in fact a Rushcliffe resident. So we have an excellent ally on the Freeport board. She actually took her position up this afternoon, didn't she, on the meeting that the chief executive and myself were actually at. So we wish Nora the very, very best in what is going to be a very, very important role as we go forward. What I want to do, Madam Mary, just update members on a few key projects on the authority, which I know that we all have a huge interest in. One is the Ukraine settlement scheme, and we currently have 126 sponsors in the borough, and we've placed 134 Ukrainians within Rushcliffe, and we have another 184 in terms of applications going through the process. I know there's been a huge amount of work by many of the authorities and local people and charities welcome these Ukrainians, and I'm absolutely delighted. I think the settlement project has been a huge success, and I'm sure it will continue to be there as well. The other key project, which I'm very pleased to announce, is the rebate, which the government announced in terms of the cost of living crisis. One of the key tools being used, and of course, one of it was rebates in terms of based on property bands A to D. And I'm delighted that Rushcliffe has actually fulfilled 100% of its allocation. That's 36,770 properties, putting back millions and millions of pounds back to our residents. I think it's a massive, massive asset to its authority with the team, and I'd just like to know Sarah's with us to pass on to the team. Fantastic performance. The actual deadline was September, and we've already done it. A number of authorities have hardly got started. So I think that's a real testament to the finance team. And we've also put out 172 discretionary grants as well to residents across Rushcliffe, which again I think is absolutely tremendous and is obviously absolutely key in this cost of living crisis. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Item 6, Chief Executive's announcements.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to remind councillors that we're going to hold 2 events, one next week in person on Thursday here in the council chamber at 6 o'clock, and the other the following week on Teams on becoming a councillor. So this is an event that we've organised. Charlotte's helped put it together. It's a non-political event, but we would like to encourage you to invite friends, colleagues, anybody in your communities who's interested in standing for either borough council or parish council elections next year to come along and hear a little bit about the process of standing, what's involved, and encourage them to put their names forward. Obviously, when we come to elections, we want people to have choices, and we want to encourage people to get involved in the democratic process. So those 2 events are next week and the week after. There's more information from Charlotte, so please do spread the word. And thank you to everybody who's so far got involved in our campaign. We've put together some publicity materials. I know many of you have put forward quotes and had films done. That's been brilliant. If anybody would like to come along to the sessions either next week or the week after to informally share their experiences as well with any prospective candidates, please let us know, because you'd be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, citizens' questions. I don't believe we have any. In which event we move to item 8, revision of the council's constitution. Councillor Robinson to move.
Thank you. Just before I go through this item, I'd just like to announce some changes some things, some amendments on this, if you just bear with me a second. So, following the meeting of the government scrutiny group, 2 additional changes were recommended, which I'd like to ask the monitoring officer to actually put into this report. Part 2 is the committee structure, which will include an additional bullet point for the government scrutiny group to cover the review of the council as a going concern. And secondly, part 3, a process for the remuneration of the chief executive to clarify that the pay scale is set by council is movement along the scale that is determined by the leader, deputy leader, and the leader of the opposition, or advised by an external professional and the strategic HR manager. Further, it has been requested that reference to the Director of Development and Economic Growth be removed from the change proposed in pages 32 and 92, and this is agreed. So as regards the actual paper you have in front of you, this is an administration item, really. It comes to council once a year, the constitution, and really to reflect constitutional changes, procedures to the CEO pay structures, GDPR changes, and also with this item includes the changes to the planning committee, which happens every month. Those changes are set out on Appendix 1. But they're summarised under the items there of Part 2, the management structures, cabinet committee. Under Part 3 is the term of reference for scrutiny groups. Part 4 is the planning committee changes I mentioned and the standing order on contracts. Part 5 is the council code of conduct and the LGA guidance and recommendations, and for the standards committee. So the paper you have in front of you was considered by the corporate governance group and approved on the 30th of June 2022. So I'd like to move the recommendation on page 13, section 2, and also with the amendments that are included that I've just spoken about. Thank you.
Councillor Edwin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak, but I'd just like to say before I do that, that it's nice to see that scrutiny was working.
Thank you. Right, do we have any discussions? Councillor Walker?
Yeah, like Councillor Garrett's going to speak on behalf of
Councillor Gale.
We don't have many problems with this except the changes to planning. We've made this point many times and we'll make it again. By moving planning to the afternoon, we are excluding a wide number of people in the population from effectively becoming councillors, because if they work, can't become a councillor because they won't be able to sit on planning committee. So we reject this.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I welcome most of the changes, and particularly the removal of the Director of Development and Economic Growth from policing the judgments of councillors. However, I still have a problem about the move of planning to an afternoon meeting. It doesn't need to be in a constitution. It could be changed, and as we already heard, we want a variety of councillors coming forward, and particularly young people who are in work do find the afternoon meetings difficult. I know it's beneficial to planners and the council officers, but I think it does have an impact on the availability of councillors, so we're not happy about that. Thank you.
Councillor Mallender?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you for the groups and the officers who spent an awful lot of time going through the Constitution. It's an arduous task. I'm glad I wasn't on that particular group, I have to say, especially for the bit about GDPR. Have been on the standards group this last couple of years, and I'm pleased to see the updates and amendments, changes made to that. I think they're greatly needed, and again, thanks to people who've been involved with that. I do have a concern that I share with the fellow councillors here about the timing of the planning meeting, and with respect to the fact that we've just mentioned that we've got a couple of meetings coming up to explain to people, you know, how to be councillors, how to encourage them to be councillors. I do ask the question back to the proposers: why is this being put in the Constitution? It needs to have a start time, certainly, but this really should be something that's dealt with, I feel, by the planning committee, either, you know, at their initial meeting of the council session, perhaps even at the initial session of the next council when that comes along, to have people arrive potentially as new councillors next year and suddenly find that the timing of the meeting is actually something that's written in the Constitution. Feels like it's really fettering the discretion of the chair of that committee and the members of that committee as to how they might best serve our community. So I just like to put that question back to the proposal of the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to hear from the leader that the proposed changes to undermine the role of the ward member are being removed. However, I can't support the permanent move of planning committee to the afternoon. This reduces democratic representation because it makes it more difficult for councillors and members of the public who work during the day to be involved. Smaller groups within the council are disproportionately affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwin, you wish to respond?
The only thing I would say, and this point has been made many times before, is that whenever you hold a meeting, there's going to be people in the population who can't attend. And I'll use the example actually of Councillor Inglis. He's never been able to sit on planning committee when it was held in the evenings because he always had a commitment on a Thursday in the evenings, and it's something that we discussed at length. There's a whole host of people who work in the hospitality industry. So to say that it is wrong to have that meeting in the afternoon, whenever you hold a meeting, you're going to exclude people from some parts of the population from attending that meeting.
I'm sorry, Councillor Upton, did I miss you?
No.
Oh, I thought you indicated.
I did indicate, but
Councillor Mulder might want to come back on a point of clarification.
Councillor Mulliner.
Is it a point of clarification?
Is that a...
thank you, Madam
Are
Mayor.
you clarifying
Just a point of clarification, if I may. I completely understand and agree with the points that there's never going to be a perfect time for this, but could you just clarify why it's necessary for this to be in the Constitution? Thank you.
Councillor.
I can't answer the direct question you ask about why is it in the Constitution just at the moment. I'd like to just rewind the debate, if I may, because I was the chair of the planning committee at the time this pilot was tested. And as my colleague here, Councillor Edivine, says, there probably never is going to be a right time when to hold this committee. You know, the patterns of work, the time that people work, I think have changed dramatically. In fact, I know they have. You know, the 9 to 5 traditional working day is long gone, I would suggest. And at the points that's already been made, you know, what suits some people won't suit others. So the reason I think why we also put it to the afternoon meeting was, and I experienced that several times, we put an agenda up which with the best intent we thought we would get through in the evening. And there were people in the public that came into these seats waiting hours for their application to be debated. And fairly often we ran out of time. And they'd sat there all evening only to be told, sorry, it'll be the next meeting in a month's time. And that was hugely embarrassing, and I suspect very frustrating for them. So there was a number of criteria, a number of experiences that made us think long and hard, why are we doing it in the evening? Would it be better to try it in the afternoon? And we had a 6 or 7 month pilot from memory. And there was a significant consultation, as I recall, from the public, applicants, developers, I think councillors, right across the piece. There was probably just shy of 100 odd people from memory that filled in a consultation. And by a long way, the majority view was put it to the afternoon. It wasn't a majority, but you know, that was the result of the consultation. So when you put it all together, the late evenings, the missing of the debate for certain people, the change in the working pattern, it'll never be right for everybody, but we feel, I certainly felt, and the results of the pilot, that it was best to put it into the afternoon. I'll have to defer to somebody else as to why it's in the Constitution. I haven't been involved in that debate, but hopefully that explains to some degree. And I don't know if Councillor Butler wants to comment as the current chair.
Councillor Butler, I think you indicated.
Yes, thank you. And really, Councillor Upton has explained a lot about the background to the reasoning for the time change. I've had experience of chairing that committee both in the old days when it used to start at 6:30 and used to have a cut-off at 10:30. And Councillor Upton is right that sometimes, for whatever reason, some of the applications were very complex and detailed, and as a result, we did, on a few occasions, run out of time, which, as Councillor Upton has said, is not very helpful to people who have turned up, sat through a lot of applications, and then finally the one they're interested in has timed out. We also have to, well, actually, just picking up on something that Councillor Mallender said, I think Councillor Mallender is a little bit worried about, I think he referred to fettering decisions of the chairman and other members of the committee by having the meeting in the afternoon. I don't get that. I don't really understand why that is. I can assure you that whatever time the meetings are held, certainly from my point of view, the decisions are not fettered. The other thing I think we need to remember, though, is that we're all human beings. And by nature of the detail of planning applications, they are very often very detailed. And they are very important because at the end of the day, planning committee, unlike most of the other committees, is a little bit different in the fact it's quite quasi-judicial. So it's a very serious, I'm not saying anything else isn't serious, but planning in particular, it's so important that procedures are followed. And I maybe it was me, but I did hear other colleagues saying this as well when we had the evening meetings. Such is the concentration needed as you get into sort of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. There's a real danger of you losing a little bit of attention to detail. And the last thing we want to do is find ourselves making any sort of silly mistakes on what are very important decisions. So that is quite a serious point in actual fact. And other similar decision-making bodies, whether they're in other councils or other legalistic situations, it's very unusual to have their meetings going on at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So, but I absolutely understand the pressure on people's diaries and times. What I dare I say that not everybody. Well, actually, Councillor Upton said it. I mean, the convenience factor, for want of a better word, may not necessarily apply quite as much as it used to do. But that's where we are at the moment, and we did have a lot of discussion about it at various different times, and so far, I think, and again, I've only recently started chairing the meeting again during the daytime. I think it seems to work better, in all honesty, than in the evening. So that's my perspective. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Gaunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is it not pressing again?
Yeah, Councillor Butler might still be switched on.
Councillor Butler, are you still switched on?
No, it's good. All right. There you go. Right, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, no. Thanks for that. I think I just want to pick up on the fact that Councillor Mallender asked a specific question, which was why is it in the Constitution? And I know there's the idea that you've changed the time because it feels better or it seems like it'll work for people. I mean, I have to admit myself, I'm not able to attend any planning meetings at all now, so I'm not able to represent my local people. But that's fine. You've chosen that. I don't understand, like Councillor Mallender says, or anyone here understand why that has to be in the Constitution. So I was hoping we could actually answer that question because we are about to vote on a constitutional change, not on why we think it's better, if that makes sense. So if we could get clarification on that, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Is anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Sims.
Yeah, as a working person, I'm a bit confused about this. I must admit, putting it as part of a constitution seems wrong. Surely that people should be able to have a say. Councillors that work, it's okay for the councillors that retired to come to these meetings, but I'm a working person. I can't come to the meetings, and there's lots of other working people in this room. And if we want to attract talent as well, why are we mandating this in a constitution? If meetings are running on too long, that's the officers' fault. They should be planning the meetings to run appropriately. Just like in the courts, they plan cases in the courts to run for certain amounts of time. It's not rocket science to do this. I'm very against this. So you know which way I'm going to be voting on it. I think it's a disgrace. Why didn't we come up with a hybrid? Why did we not come up with, right, we'll have an afternoon meeting one month and then an evening meeting the next month? Surely that would take intelligence to do. I just can't believe it.
Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you. Just remind me, this is actually a constitution. It's not a debate about planning meetings. We've had this debate for hours and hours and hours. As you said, we did a pilot for 6 months, which the full council agreed. Feedback surveys went to everybody. It was transparent. It was above, and it was agreed. It went through. I'm sorry, it wasn't rubbish. It was actually a fact. And so, why are we having this debate again? Rewind it again. People said because we work, and as someone said, our economy's changed. So what are you going to do? Are you going to start to discriminate people who work at night time? Oh, you can't sit on it then. Yeah. So it's, yeah, exactly as we said, we need that balance. Just in terms of the key questions, because I'm not going to debate this any longer on this. Key questions there is, first of all, the chair can amend the time. So it is actually going in the Constitution, but the chair can amend the time. So it's within that power. And also, every meeting is in the Constitution. The very meeting you're in now is in the Constitution. Don't see you complaining about that. So is scrutiny groups. It's in the Constitution. Cabinet meetings, they're in the Constitution. It's the way a well-run council actually runs itself and governs itself to make sure it is above the, what do I want to call it? The discipline of a council is absolutely right, and it's transparent to everybody. And that is why it is in the Constitution. But can I just say it can be changed by the chairman. He can apply to officers, and if there's some need to do that, he can change it. I have more to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will therefore move to the vote. can we have an indication of all those in favour? And all those against? Any abstentions? The text is therefore carried. We move now to item 9, Public Space Protection Order. Councillor Inglis to move.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the process to this report started back in January 2021 when the Community's Scrutiny Group considered that the current council resources to undertake dog fouling issues were very limited because we've only got 2 employed wardens who also had time-consuming environmental issues and responsibilities to deal with as well. So 2 public consultations were undertaken, the first with parish councils and the second was then a public one, and both supported overwhelmingly, as can be seen in the Annex 3. Approval from Cabinet was also gained to take this forward in supplementing the Dog Fouling Act order that's already in place, but that does fall short for the new building and residential areas we've got on their open spaces because they're not included. We have responsibilities to ensure the safety of our residents and visitors to all our open spaces, and this PSPO, Public Space Protection Order, is the right tool to deliver that. This really is a safeguarding order. It will protect children, it will minimise risk, but it will ultimately have the teeth to effectively deal with irresponsible dog owners and dog walkers. I will stress, prosecution is not the aim of this PSPO. It's not intended as an aggressive or a proactive prosecution means or an income generator, but it can and it will be used to its full following intelligence-led to address public complaints to targeted areas or for those who regularly take no responsibility for their dogs. So why do we need this order? It will help protect all open spaces where the public have access and to play parks that are fenced or enclosed by exclusion, and having dogs on leads in signed areas to ensure owners have the means for removing any excrement. I do fully appreciate that the majority of dog owners are totally responsible, but dogs can be unpredictable, as history has shown, with unprovoked dog attacks, especially in parks and recreational areas. I'm sure everyone has experienced that horror of treading in dog muck, that smell, along with associated health and hygiene risks. And then we've got the dog poo fruit trees, where the dog walkers hang them, the bags, because they don't want to carry them around, and they conveniently leave them there. Totally not acceptable. So conscientious owners will have nothing to fear or have no need to change their habits. Do they respect children's play areas? Do they pick up their dog's mess and dispose of it correctly? Do they heed signs to have the dog on a lead in specific areas? Of course they do. This PSPO clearly sets out a standard for everyone to understand and to follow in helping to keep Rushcliffe safe, with no excuses. This has been embraced by our local neighbourhood police commander and the Police and Crime Commissioner as a vital tool. The PSPO, however, will allow for an extended investigation capacity through the utilisation of contracted enforcement officers, currently WISE, on a cost-neutral basis to increase the council's capacity in dealing with complaints. The 4 E's will be in place: engage, explain, encourage. They'll be all considered before an enforcement is made. And any action will be monitored by officers to ensure it's proportionate and in the public interest. It's also very disappointing that despite much consultation, that Tolland Forest Council have continually requested that their open space be excluded from this order. which it has been, but the rest of Rushcliffe is positively engaged and has been incorporated. And those reasons for tolerance are set out in the annex. PSPOs are reviewed every 3 years to ensure they remain current, effective and proportionate. So I have no hesitation. I see no negative reasons to fully support the report, and the recommendation is in 9. And that's to recommend that the proposed PSPO for dog control related antisocial behaviour is set out in Appendix 1 be approved. And I'd ask you all to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Councillor Dickman.
Firstly, I declare that I'm a dog owner. I am one of the conscientious owners that Councillor Inglis mentions, and I have absolutely no concerns or issues in needing to change my dog walking activities. I have no worries about being fined. I have no worries about being asked if I have a supply of bags. I have the confidence that I'm already doing this, and this order is looking to achieve in influencing all dog owners to take responsibility for their dog or dogs. The public support in the consultations have been overwhelming, and why shouldn't it have been? PSPO requirements are basic and are just those of people who have consideration of others. We all want to enjoy our communities. This PSPO is not about the potential of dangerous dogs, but friendly bounding dogs, those jumping up for attention and affection, and playful barking also affect many adults and children who have a genuine fear or just don't like dogs in the first place. It is important that this PSPO is not seen and reported as a means of fining people, but to the concept that the intention is to provide greater safety and enjoyment in the great open spaces we are fortunate to have in Rushcliffe. We shouldn't have to wait until there has been a serious incident. This is a welcomed preemptive initiative. So I am seconding this recommendation in section 9 that the proposed PSPO is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickman. Do we have any discussions? Yes, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group will support this recommendation as we welcome anything that makes this issue more enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Jones?
Councillor Price will speak on this, but before I forget, can I congratulate the leader on not having any resignations from his cabinet?
Councillor Price.
Evening, young.
We support this initiative. Dog fouling can render public spaces unsafe and unusable. We have an ongoing issue with this in Boundary Road Park in Musters Ward, and where the action of a small number of irresponsible dog owners is making the space practically unusable for local children. Any additional powers that make enforcement more likely to be successful are really welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Mallender?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, as the saying goes, there's no such thing as the dog poo fairy. We all have this problem in our wards to a greater or less extent. I think probably every single councillor across the entire country does as well. Within Lady Bay, we've got a wonderful open area. We've got the Hook local nature reserve. Most dog owners are very, very conscientious and pick things up, but we do still find in a lot of the bushes and hanging on the trees and further down the Trent as well, a lot of the bags and, you know, who's taking these away. I must admit, when they were first introduced, I was not a fan of PSPOs. However, I think this is an excellent use and I have to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We support this measure to deal with this issue, which is of such concern to many residents. The requirement to carry poo bags is much more enforceable and also gives opportunities for education on the subject. The fact that the public open space on new estates is now subject to enforcement is most welcome. I hope that there will be strong communications campaign following the adoption of the PSPO and that it will be refined in future to increase its scope. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Butler, you indicated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This may already be said. I'm struggling to hear what people are saying, I'm afraid. So if it's been said, apologies. But I mean, most dog owners are absolutely responsible, and and do as they are supposed to do, and take the dog back, the poo bags around with them. They also keep the dogs under control when they should. But it's such a shame that we have to do this because of a relatively small minority of antisocial people. I actually have to say, I feel a bit worried about the dogs. I mean, if the owners are not taking poo bags around and probably not looking after the dogs either, so I do worry quite genuinely about that. But as it may have been mentioned, but this habit that some people have got of hanging the dog bags in the trees and the hedges. I mean, I fail to understand the logic behind that. I mean, we've all got these in our various bits of the borough where you've got footpaths and parks and all the rest of it, where the council, whether it's this council or the parish councils, have gone to the trouble of putting dog bins and even general waste bins, which you are allowed to put dog waste bags in. And you often find within 6 feet of these the council provided bins, people are still hanging the things on the trees. I just don't get it. I've never been brave enough to ask a walker why have you left your dog poo bag there.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, because it probably get me into trouble. But it's such a shame that we have to do this. And if this measure is far from being a sort of hard stick and all the rest of it and financial gains, I know we're not doing it for that. But if it does somehow get the message across of people who are tending to be a bit antisocial with the way they look after the dogs and walk the dog, then we should welcome it and let's hope it helps teach a lesson or two. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Right, Councillor English, you have a right to reply.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for supporting this. I think it's important. To have a decision now. I think that Councillor Butler's understanding, what I understand is people do hang these entrances because they don't want to walk around with it and then conveniently forget to pick it up again. So thank you very much, everybody.
Very well, we'll move now to the vote.
Councillor Sims wants to speak.
Sorry?
Councillor Sims wants to speak.
Councillor Sims, I believe you want to come back.
Yeah, just wanted to say, as a dog owner of 3, yeah, they're not really dogs, they're sort of rat size, but it really irritates me looking at dog mess as we're walking around. One thing that Newton Parish Council did to try and resolve, it's not worked completely, but it's helped, is they have bag dispensers and they provide bags. Now, if we are to do this, I think we need to give people, because sometimes you can run out of a bag, especially if you've got a schnauzer that do a lot of pooing. So, you know, that last little bit that she squeezes out and it's the 6th and you're saying, where's it all come from? So I would suggest, if we are going to do that, we use a bit of a carrot as well. And we do have bags available for those people that can go and get them and get a bag and pick up their mess, you know, rather than just fine people for getting, you know, coming to their last bag. We're all human beings and we all run out of bags here and there, and it's worked really well in Newton. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to come back on that last point, if we are going to dispense bags, then can we please stick to our policy of being plastic free and having biodegradable ones, please? And also a point for that is that if you do have plastic ones, even if they're left on the ground, this is a bit horrible, but horses, and in fact deer, and I know because I work at Woollerton Park, will unfortunately eat the dog poo because they're attracted to it because it smells like the amount of rusk that's put in it and so on. And they can't be sick, horses and deer, so they will actually. We've actually had found one dead. It was cut open, found that its stomach was full of plastic bags from doing this, and was starved to death. So they're a danger to horses and things if people leave plastic bags lying about. It's actually better to leave the dog poo as it is, at least it rots, rather than putting it in a bag and then leaving it on the ground, or even worse, as you say, hanging it on a tree. So I hope, should we should we do that or encourage that sort of thing? That we'll also be saying, put your dog poo in a bag and make sure it's a biodegradable one at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender, for that message. Can I just say to everyone, can you please make sure you switch your microphones off, because it means that the next speaker's microphone isn't working. Just to remind.
I have to agree with my colleagues. I'm struggling. The microphone is loud. They're struggling up here to speak. I didn't hear a single word Councillor Jones said, but I've had it told to me. Yeah.
You want me to repeat it?
Write it down, Mark.
We're just going to have a quick look at the IT settings. Do apologise. At the top table, we can hear you all really well. So we can't tell that you can't hear each other, because we can hear everybody. So Steve's just having a look, but I would encourage you to really try and project into speakers, into the microphones. Thank you.
Are you able to hear me if I say, can we move to the vote? All those in favour?
Don't see an unanimous. Don't think there's anybody against. You can try, but I don't think there's anyone against. It's unanimous.
Anybody against? Anyone against?
Yeah, I see. It must be the phones which can hear you have perfectly. You can't see them, so it's not setting the phones.
Yeah. Oh, so move it closer.
Hello, testing.
You can't hear me?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? No, you couldn't. You can't hear me, can you? I've got my microphone on.
Oh, it could be now because Steve's done something. Steve, I don't think they're working at all now.
Switch them off now.
Yeah, they're not working at all now. No.
Let's see if we can do it. He's just looking at it now.
I'm logging you out. You're back in. No, because then we can't hear on YouTube.
It's all coming through on YouTube. Right.
Oh, it's working.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Item 10. Can you hear me now? Hey, I'm here, am I?
You were right.
Bingham Improvement Board report. Councillor Robinson.
Or the microphone improvement report. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bingham Town Council item tonight. If you recall, full council accepted a petition. Bingham deserves better. This was following on several years of complaints. In fact, 25 complaints since 2019 about the running of Bingham Town Council and their behaviour. Unfortunately, with that petition, if you recall, legally we could not actually action the requests that were put in there. But I think we all recognise that there was a major issue. I proposed a change in the officer's recommendation to actually set up this board to look at Bingham from an independent point of view and make recommendations. I'm delighted full council supported us on this, and the chief executive, myself and the mayor the clerk from Bingham met to agree the terms of reference for the improvement board, and these were also approved by Bingham Town Council in December 2022. So the board was established. We had 3 independent members on that board, chaired by the ex-chief executive from Bassett Law, and we also had 2 Bingham Town Council members on there as well. The report was completed and it was considered by Bingham Town Council on the 24th of May, and that council accepted the report and the recommendations that were made. It was reviewed by Cabinet at this council on the 14th of June, and we also agreed to bring it back to full council as we did tonight. Just to summarise the objectives of the improvement board, and that was really to put an action plan in response to the petition, Bingham Deserved Better. Secondly, to put improvements to the council's wider government arrangements. Thirdly, to ensure a range of voices could all contribute to the development of the governance of that council. And fourthly, to help the council develop its culture and respect between councillors and also between councillors and staff. The feedback was quite wide scale. It was 25 different stakeholders. A lot of documents were reviewed and meetings were attended. So I think it's fair to say that it was an excellent job done by the Bingham, the improvement board there. I think also we should acknowledge the members of that board were extremely experienced and skilled. Fortunately, some of the findings that came out of that report make very disappointing reading, and I don't intend to go through it all. But a flavour there, it showed a lack of perspective with Bingham, the too much political control, unrealistic demands of the public on that council, the lack of openness and inclusiveness on some items, the poor behaviour and the disregard for the council's code of conduct, and it also derived that the council was significantly overstructured. I think for me, though, there are 2 observations that are most disappointing. Another consequence of the behaviour of Bingham Town Council and how this is going on is the lack of focus on actually delivering for the community, and especially the need there that we've discussed many times is the car park there, which has virtually gone nowhere because all the focus, energy and time has gone all on internal issues, and that's really let the community down. I know the community feel it. And secondly, the financial cost of this whole exercise. Tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money wasted on HR advice, legal advice, this improvement board, officers' time here as well. At a time when every council is trying to save money, tens of thousands of pounds has gone on to this. And I think that is an absolute disgrace. I really do. Moving forward, the report does give very clear and tangible recommendations. And underpinning these recommendations, and it's very fundamental, the Nolan principles of public life. And they are very key, not just to Bingham, to every public authority in the country. The recommendations of the report cover training, structure, HR matters, complaint handling, and their vision. I don't intend to go through all the recommendations there. You'll see them there in the report. I would just like to finish and just quote from the report itself. If we stop fighting and start cooperating, the future is very rosy and we could become a beacon. This potential is in members' hands. And I think that really just sums it up for Bingham Town Council. So I'd like now to move the recommendation on page 65, considering this report, and also would also request that we bring this back as well to members with an update on the actions that were recommended to Bingham Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're going to support the recommendation. It's good to see democracy returning to the residents of Bingham, and we really hope we'll start to see return of decency and integrity to how politics is run now.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Jones.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we'll also be supporting the motion. We're very aware of the parlous state of affairs and the impact on residents and the perception of the town council as it was. The report shows some excellent work, as the leader has said, and it's particularly important that it is reviewed in 6 months' time. The only slight fly in the ointment is in the report where it says people who are recommended to apologise to the previous town clerk have failed to do so. But apart from that, it looks like there might be steps forward, and we very much hope that for the people of Bingham.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Green Group is also happy to support the recommendation. I think it's excellent that we've got this report before us, and that we are able to sort of give the people of Bingham the kind of assistance that they need to get things back in their house in order in terms of the governance. I think I said some time ago, Bingham is pretty much set to double in size over the next few years. Huge amount of housing being built near there. It's no longer a place where people can, people expect that their parish council, their town council, their borough council, all levels of governance behave with probity and sensibly and work for the benefit of those communities, whether that's local or national. In Bingham, the people deserve better, and I think we're giving them the help that's needed, and I'm happy to go with this recommendation.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you indicated?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quickly, I just want to pick up on one of the points that Councillor Robinson made regarding the car park, and fully endorse his comments. That is a major project for the people of Bingham, and it's vital that that project is now driven hard and quickly. As Councillor Mallender said, there's a lot of development coming, and we need to get some additional car parking provision in place, hopefully before all the development is finished. The demand for parking is going to increase substantially, so we need to really put the pressure on driving that project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edvine, did you reserve the right to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'd only add to the leader's comments, and that is that I wish Councillor Williams, who's recently been elected as Mayor of Bingham, good fortune in improving putting into place the recommendations of the Improvement Board. And the report clearly does make it clear that it can only be improved by Bingham residents or Bingham Council itself. So I certainly wish Councillor Williams well in bringing that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you for support. I think we all share the same feelings about this whole exercise. And as I said, I've made a commitment there that in 6 months' time, we'll bring back a report and an update on the progress of Bingham Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous, so that is carried. We now move to item 11, which is notice of motions. I have declared an interest in this next item, and therefore the next item will be chaired by Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Right, well, we move on to the first motion, motion A, and I would like to ask Councillor Clark to move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Mayor. And onto a sort of a more leisurely issue, every pun intended. So this motion relates to the leisure corridor of the Grantham Canal, and health and well-being has very much going up the agenda nationally. Royal family and other distinguished people all are very keen to promote health and well-being quite rightly. The issue surrounding the Grantham Canal is that it does leak and it is losing water. And that means that it gets deprived of things like wildlife and flora and fauna in general. So I'm very happy to move this recommendation, which is actually, I haven't got a page number. The recommendation that's set out on the screen. I'll just read out the first paragraph. Council resolves to pledge its support to the maintenance and health of the Grantham Canal in the borough of Rushcliffe as an integral wildlife and wellbeing corridor, and asks Communities Scrutiny Group to oversee those following actions, the 4 bullet points that are set out as you see. And there's an enormous amount of value in water being present and you being next to water. It helps in relaxation, it helps your general mental health, even if you're just walking alongside it or sitting and watching the wildlife go about their business on the last 2 or 3 years during the COVID pandemic. And I think that's really brought to the fore the benefits of water and the leisure corridor that the Grantham Canal represents. So we need to ensure that the government understands the value of the waterways, such as the Grantham Canal. And in fact, we, as the motion suggests, we need to be calling on DEFRA to reclassify the Grantham Canal and indeed other remainder waterways in order that it can receive funding for those vital repairs. Some of you may be aware that doctors have a process blue prescribing that means that these waterways are a valuable help to the overstretched NHS because often they are encouraging maybe people who are suffering from mental health or have well-being issues, and very much being associated with the water leisure is very much part of that recovery process. So this motion is all about conserving the valuable resource of the Grantham Canal and not letting that water drain away, which it is at the moment. And there needs to be funding to put in place to actually help the repairs of the canal to stop all that water disappearing, because sometimes it can just be left as a muddy quagmire rather than proper water. So just running quickly through the bullet points, that first bullet point is designed to ensure water is retained. As I said earlier, the environment, mental health, well-being and sport. The second bullet point is ensuring that we can work and make sure that other local authorities and adjoining local authorities, because the canal does actually go through 3 counties, Nottinghamshire, Leicestershire, Lincolnshire, so that involves also, as part from those 3 county councils, then Rushcliffe Borough Council, Melton Borough Council and South Kesteven District Council. So there can be a lot of cooperation can be engendered. The third bullet point relates to the service level agreement with the Canals and River Trust, and that is so that there can be specific reference, again, to that water retention, which is absolutely so important. And the final bullet point is that we write to DEFRA. I suppose as we compile that letter, we need to make sure we've perhaps got the right name of the Secretary of State, whoever that may be at the time. So we probably need to check on that hourly or even more often. But at the end of the day, we need to be ensuring that DEFRA bring that up, this issue up the agenda, so that they can actually be encouraged and persuaded to reclassify the remainder waterways in order that we can benefit from that funding and that we can ensure that we are preserving this valuable leisure corridor for the future. I move the motion if I haven't already made it clear.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Mallinder, you wish to speak? Second.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And yes, I rise to speak to second this motion. The Grantham Canal runs close by several of Rushcliffe's towns and villages: Bassingfield, Cotgrave, the Cropwells, Kinalton, and of course Hickley. But it's an asset to all of us. In West Bridgeford, it borders Lady Bay alongside Bagcliffe Road before connecting to the Trent. It's a haven for wildlife, providing a variety of habitats for all manner of flora and fauna. It provides a quiet route along the towpath for people to walk or cycle, taking in the fresh air, enjoying the views, learning about wildlife and exploring our countryside. It's part of our shared history, as the canal was originally built to transport coal and other materials to Grantham and agricultural produce back towards Nottingham. It's a benefit to the environment, to mental health aided by social prescribing, well-being and sport. This was particularly evident during COVID lockdown, when people were able to walk along the towpath and keep their social distancing from others at the same time. Since 1968, the canal has been classified as a remainder waterway, one deemed to have no economic future, and maintenance only being required to be carried out where failure to do so would create a health or safety issue. But that view was very much centred on the original industrial transportation use, not how canals have evolved over the years. For example, aiding regeneration in major cities and becoming places for people to visit in their own right, or to try their hand at narrowboating, or to sit at a pub and just take in the view. Along the Grantham Canal, various community groups now exist to use, protect, preserve or restore it. The Grantham Canal Society undertake a great deal of restoration work, mainly at the Grantham end, bringing sections back into use. At Hickling, the community work to keep the basin in water and in use. And at Lady Bay, the Friends of Lady Bay Canal group works to keep the canal as a wildlife corridor and maintain it for the enjoyment of all residents, human or otherwise. I support all elements of the motion here tonight, but to me the most critical is to review the service level agreement with the Canal and Rivers Trust to include specific reference to water retention. And I'm pleased to see this will be going to community scrutiny group later this month. Not all of the canal holds water. Much of the section between Cotgrave and through Cropwell Bishop is completely dry. Water in the Lady Bay section has fallen critically low in recent years and is quite low at the moment, effectively becoming linear ponds, as the only connection to the rest of the canal is through a series of narrow culverts. Councillors, the canal is a home for wildlife and a benefit to the well-being of our residents. I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, we're going to support the motion because it's very much enjoyed. Dry, which is quite shocking. I was a little bit puzzled by the motion, I have to admit, because it didn't strike me as something that was kind of something for a motion. It was more to go straight to scrutiny. But, you know, then I had a conversation with Councillor Mallender, and he convinced me that it's worthy of a motion because it raises awareness of the issue. So.
Right.
Yeah, we support this motion. We acknowledge the significant impact of this amenity, particularly in urban areas like West Bridgeford, as both a leisure facility and a wildlife corridor. And we hope that this will lead to tangible action to address the water loss in the canal and to preserve it for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. We support preservation and maintenance of the Grantham Canal for the reasons stated. However, this issue is already before scrutiny, and we feel that council debate is inappropriate while this is in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, we'd be genuinely surprised if anyone couldn't support this. I mean, it's for all the reasons we've heard this evening. It runs through part of my and my colleagues' patch, and it makes a lovely walk or bike ride. Horse riders walk by on the towpath, and the genuine help it brings to everyone for getting out and about, fresh air, health reasons that we've heard about. I'd also just like to, it helps also to remind everyone as well about the great work that a small band of volunteers do. I'm sure many of us have met them over the years. They're out weekends. They sometimes bring people in from all over the country, all volunteers to help tidy it up and dig it out. So anything we can do to help raise the profile of the canal, it helps them as well. And also, that it's quite funny, really. Well, not funny, it's sad. That some 22 years ago in the millennium, it's parts of the canal we had new lock gates put in, but the irony of it is that, as we're hearing tonight, part of the canal doesn't have water, and it's leaking, and it's such a shame. It's a missed opportunity, and there is so much opportunity for the canal. So anything like this that can be done to help surely should be welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Malinda, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just want to make a slight correction. The original purpose of the Grantham Canal was actually to take night soil from the busy urban area of Nottingham and go and spread it on the fields in Lincolnshire so that everything would be fertile and growing. So it's a very good way of using waste in those days. So yeah, that was its original purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is being discussed quite well now. Councillor Moore.
I promise you I won't talk about night soil. Yeah, I've lived in Cropwell Ward in its greater way since about 1984. And it's been a real frustrating time regarding the Grantham Canal. Really pleased that this motion's been brought forward. But what it needs is teeth. And at the end of the day, it needs some big teeth to get hold of this. Because since I've lived there, I've been involved with scouts and all sorts of people. Everybody's tried to help. The Grantham Canal people have all tried to help. A lot of it is really genuine wanting to get it done. But at the end of the day, we haven't had a result. We've had a lot what I call score draws. It's been improved and there's no water. This needs some serious money thrown at it. And maybe whatever happens with devolution and those sort of things, maybe this could be brought to the top of the agenda as some money. It needs serious money spending on it. It's all right, the scrutiny group recommending all these sort of things, but it really needs, and I would love to see that the result of this is that the Borough Council is able then to put serious pressure on DEFRA and say, let's get some serious money onto this and get it fixed, because people in my wards, I mean, they love it. Everybody loves it. Everybody supports this. I don't think anybody in the room is not going to support it, but it has been frustrating. Well, since I've lived there since 1984, that parts of my ward in the Cropwells never had any water. Still lovely to walk along, but there's no water. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more speakers, yes, Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll be brief. When I came up from London in 1975, I suppose I'd been badged as a canal anorak because I joined the Canal Restoration Society and I was with it for about 5 years. And I've walked that canal, most of it, over the last 50 odd years. And without going into a history lesson, that canal, I think, was built 250 years ago, something like that. And the canal without any water, as many sections are at the moment, but if it all goes without water, is a real possibility, then it ain't a canal anymore. And it'll just become a ditch, frankly, of vegetation, which will have some wildlife. But as I think, as Councillor Clark said, without the water, I think it loses a lot of its health and well-being credentials. And I and friends have walked it a lot during COVID and got a lot of satisfaction, pleasure and whatever from it. And I wasn't alone. I met a lot of people and I stopped and talked to them at a social distance.
And that was their take on it. And there's a lot of cycling and a lot of other activities, walking and the like. I don't think in the foreseeable future it's going to have boating on it for its full length. It was originally envisaged to link up with the Sleaford navigation into the River Witham, Boston Dock and out to the North Sea. I mean, that is not going to happen, I don't think. And whether it will ever connect to the Trent is a debatable thing as well. But I come back to the point, we're raising its awareness, and it's all about this remainder waterway that happened some time back. And that's what's wrong. It needs some puddled clay to seal it. It's done pretty well, 250 years, but you know, it needs some care and attention. As Councillor Moore says, it doesn't come cheap. But I think, you know, now is the time. It needs significant investment. I absolutely agree with you. We're not talking of a few thousand here, we're talking of hundreds of thousands probably. Well, so I think for all the reasons stated, health and well-being, a leisure corridor, wildlife, etc., that's where it needs some focus. It just doesn't want words. If we don't do something in the next year, 18 months, it'll be dry. It's a fact that the reservoir fills it up, pushes it down the canal. It's like a plug hole in a bath. The plug hole's open, it's draining away, and it'll be nothing. We shall lose it. So that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, do you wish to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a few points, and I thank everybody for all their support and their comments. Just to pick up very quickly the issue of the night soil that Councillor Malina mentioned. I'll just add to that, just so everybody's fully aware, because especially those who enjoy eating cheese, in actual fact, the night soil principally came to the canal basin, where it was distributed over the fields and pastures of that area, which is why the milk is so fantastic in the area, and the dairies use that milk for making the cheese that we all enjoy. So that's one little history lesson. Councillor Moore is quite right, and Councillor Upton, obviously it does need a hell of a lot of money, and we've got to start somewhere to bring us up the agenda, and that's the purpose of this motion, to bring far greater awareness of it. And I certainly hope that when the scrutiny group is considering this, they ensure that they have invited representatives from the Canals and River Trust to have an input into the discussion that takes place at the scrutiny group. But apart from that, sounds like hopefully it's going to be unanimous, Madam Deputy Mayor. So thank you for everybody's support.
Thank you. Right. We'll now go to the vote on the motion that's up on the screens there. All in favour? Yep. Okay. I believe that's unanimous, but I can say anyone against? No? Any abstentions? Can't see any. Any abstentions? Any abstentions? One. Oh, okay. One. Yeah. Okay. 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 Yep. I declare then that the motion is carried. Thank you very much. I will move back now.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Oh, is that yours?
Right, we now move to item 11D, which is a motion to be moved by Councillor Robinson. Oh, yeah. Technical hitch.
Just check the cable again. Yeah. That takes a while.
Thank you. Let me first of all say this motion is not about vilifying railway workers. It's not about even questioning, and in fact I want to give the respect of the right to strike. It's legal and absolutely fully respect that every worker in this country has a right to withdraw their labour if they choose. I think we should all absolutely appreciate how important infrastructure is in this country and the actual job that these people do. But that's one of the reasons why I brought this motion, is exactly that, because with that comes responsibility, huge responsibility. And the sole reason for bringing this motion is about a voice for Rushcliffe residents and businesses. It's people who've contacted me over the last few weeks by email, who I've seen in person, who have phoned me, voicing their absolute despair and the frustration about the impact those strikes had in June, that are currently still being planned by these unions. In the motion, it talks about hospital patients, and the patients actually had their care changed. One of them was cancer, so told you cannot come in because they couldn't get the train. You can't drive. Pupils, the height of stress, taking their examination, told, sorry, your schedule's changed because we can't get into school. Delayed. Cars, of course, people had to switch to cars. So what happened this strike? We had to put more cars on the road. Pollution, everything that we're supposed to be against. The workers who these unions are supposed to represent couldn't get to work. Hours and hours of inconvenience. They couldn't see their families. Holiday plans. More people just want to go on holiday. Sorry, you can't, because you can't get a train, because we're not going to provide you with that train. So your holiday's cancelled, changed. Just remind me, we've just come back from pandemics. That's just cost this country £400 billion. 400 billion. Businesses on the floor. People have lost their jobs. One business very close to the railway station lost 35% of their trade and laid off 2 people because of these strikes. That is the effect of the judgment of what happens. And I know the opposition will sit there and say, oh, we're banging on about strikes and the unions and things. All I ask is just put yourselves in the shoes of some of these Rushcliffe residents. Yeah, the voice that you're supposed to represent, of the inconvenience of what this actually meant. Now, I do not diminish at all the complexities of negotiations and everything else like that. All I'm saying is, just look at the impact of what these strikes do. And it hasn't just been the railway workers. We see so many are being planned now, whether it be in the airports. We've seen it in some of the ferries and things. And I actually think it is the absolute worst thing you can ever do, and the impact it has on there. Let's remember, also talking about the industry here, that's actually lost 25% of its customers. So it's 25% down on its pre-pandemic levels. So that's a good reaction, isn't it? I'll tell you what, so let's pull the trains then. So more people work from home, more people use Zoom and Teams, or use their cars. This is an industry also that has received £16 billion in subsidies in the last 2 years. That figure, £16 billion in subsidies to make sure that these very people on strike have not lost a penny, all their pensions paid, all their jobs kept, and that we actually keep it going. 16 billion. It's about £600 per household of every household in the UK. What about the financial side? Drivers. Average wage of a driver, 59,000, 60,000. Some earning 70.
Sorry, point of order. I don't want to annoy you, but it's misplaced. The majority of people who are on strike are not drivers. Drivers have been.
Didn't say it was all the drivers.
People, but it's not fair to do that.
Didn't say it was all the drivers. Just saying, it's rail work. Didn't say all that. I'm just giving you the example of what drivers earn as part of this industry. And you're quite right, it wasn't all there because signalmen, we're talking about the industry. And the main issue here, this is an industry that is just not evolving and developing. Like private business has to do after the pandemic, all the economic changes, whether in shipping, look at the airways, we still have a railway business still set in the last century. And this is one of the heart of it, is trying to modernise it and make it work for people you represent. And that's why I bring this motion tonight. It is not about questioning the right to strike. It's not about vilifying the industry. It's about the impact on the people everyone in this room represents. The people who couldn't get to the hospitals and their schools and their work. And I think we owe them to make a stand. It's only a small voice, but I think it's an important voice, and we should make it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I'd like to second this motion, but I'll reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, the cognitive dissonance in the Tory party never ceases to amaze me, I have to admit. To start that speech saying you support strike workers and then to lay it like this is nothing short of just madness, actually. But I'll get on to what I was going to say anyway. So it'll be no surprise to anyone that the Labour group will not be supporting this very confused, puerile motion. It is not only a motion where we can have no impact, but it's completely ideologically based and it looks to divide. And really, it's just a chance for Councillor Robinson to lecture the rest of us. The idea of writing a letter lambasting rail workers who are trying to make ends meet in the cost of living crisis after 10 years of austerity is divisive, ill-timed, and quite frankly, cruel. This government is in collapse, and this is what the leader of our borough does for us? Brings this? Attacking rail workers looking to make rail travel safer rather than discussing corruption, abuse of power, being lied to again and again is weak and an obvious attempt at diversion and looks to play us all for fools. I would ask the leader to turn his letter writing skills to the real issues of the people of Rushcliffe, the utter lack of moral integrity in his party's government. The Labour group would like to take the opportunity.
Can you just stop a second? Point of order, please. Nothing to do with the government at all. I haven't mentioned the government.
Nothing to do with this. We have no, this is absolutely everything to do with this. It's a total diversion.
Sorry, didn't mention anything about the government at all.
No, because this is my point is a diversion from the real issues. You're telling us this is the real issue, and I'm saying no, it's not. So I'd like Labour Robinson would like to take the opportunity to publicly show solidarity. Just show solidarity. Now carry on, shall I? Stick to the. Oh, sorry. I didn't hear.
Councillor Walker.
I just didn't hear.
Would you stick to the point?
Yes,
of the
I'm
motion?
finishing off.
It has nothing to do with telling lies.
I think it does, but
you might. But
do you think
it's
it does?
not the point.
Can I stand up now?
Councillor Robinson, please.
The Labour group would like to take the opportunity to publicly show solidarity to those affected by the ideologically driven austerity that has led to this politics of division. We want to look for ways to build bridges as opposed to nasty finger-pointing, blame-filled motions that would like to propose to this council an amendment. Okay. And I have a seconder, yeah, Councillor Gaunt, yeah.
Councillor Gaunt, thank you. Have we a copy?
Received that, and the we can put it up on the screen.
Does it require me to read all the way through it?
No. Can I come in a second? Sorry, just to make it clear, the actual motion is the bit that goes from as a council onwards. As a council, so Councillor Robinson's motion was, as a council, we call on the unions, calling these strikes and causing so much misery and inconvenience to our residents to cease this industrial action immediately and get back to the negotiating table to seek an agreement. So the amendment that you are proposing, Councillor Walker, is the bit at the bottom there from the last paragraph, as a council. So if you'd like to talk to your proposed amendment.
Okay, so just say the bit at the end.
Yes, yeah. Please, yeah.
So as a council, we would call on the government, rail companies and the unions to cease the industrial action immediately and get back to the negotiating table to seek an agreement. to end the misery that's caused to some of our residents.
Councillor Robinson?
No, she can carry on speaking to it. She's got
2
minutes.
Sorry. I thought you'd finished.
No, she's going to explain it now.
I thought you'd sat down and finished.
Yeah, no, carry on. Yeah.
So I was on a quick conclusion, but I would like you to sign your letter, Councillor Robinson, and yours in solidarity, please, for the rest of us. Thank you.
We're just amending the slide, councillors. We're just amending the slide so that you can see just the bit that's the motion with the proposed changes that have been put forward by Councillor Walker, and you can then compare it with what you've had published in your packs. So if you just bear with us for a couple of minutes so we can get that done. Come back on the screen. It's coming. Oh, okay. So you can see. So if you say to the councillors now, you can see, and Councillor Gaunt can now second that amendment. Okay.
Right. Now, are we clear? This is the amendment to the motion. And Councillor Gaunt is now going to second that. Is everybody clear? Oh no. Don't believe it.
Right, it's going to come for Councillor Gowland. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Right, it's interesting the word responsibility was used very early on by Councillor Robinson, and obviously he feels a sense of responsibility, but quite an interesting word considering the situation we find ourselves in this country at the moment, with no one taking responsibility. I find it remarkable that in the middle of the worst constitutional crisis that any of us has lived through or even studied in our history books, during a cost of living crisis with inflation at 10% and with the worst forecasted growth in the G7, the government marred to the hilt with sleaze.
Could you please stick? Oh,
It is
no,
still-
this is the motion. This is not.
Yeah, the motion isn't just that, it's the wording before, because that's what will be published in our motion. So this is the change, but we're still talking about the rest of it. So I'm surprised that this has been brought, to be honest. The amendments that we're proposing, this bit, are attempting to depoliticise this motion so that it can actually have some effect for our residents, which of us would hope is the motivation for Councillor Robinson submitting this dreadful motion, not simply as a cheap political stunt. But firstly, it needs to be clear that a fair amount of the fault of these strikes can be plumped fairly at the doors of the government, who have made it patently clear that they do not intend to engage in discussions with the unions, and until the strikes occurred, not one single government minister had attended any talks. This is relevant. The government wants the rail unions to negotiate with their striking members' employers, the rail operators, rather than with the civil servants or ministers. This is a difficult line to hold, as rail is a natural monopoly and the public utility which has received £16 billion of subsidy during the pandemic, precisely because the government thought it was an essential service to preserve, as you said. And the government has always taken an interventionist strategy on pricing and ticketing since privatisation. By commenting on the strike directly, the government has made it even harder to claim that it has no part in this dispute. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, should I say ex-Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, wrote in The Sun, commenting in detail on negotiations of pay and working practices. For this reason, the RMT boss Mick Lynch argued that the rail operators are unable to negotiate with him meaningfully. In effect, in recent weeks, the union has been negotiating with the government, but the government has not even been in the room. The only way that this can move forward is for that to be added, if that's what you want, and the government to actually engage in the process. Secondly, the amendment to the opening paragraph, which you've now removed from there, but is on there still, is to make it clear that only some residents were affected in Rushcliffe. The government themselves actually put out a pre-release, or a government release, press release, during the time, stating that early data shows that, unlike in the past, Many people now have the opportunity to work from home. So we haven't even had a rush to the roads as traffic has instead gone online, which means the unions aren't even having the overall impact they might have hoped. Is that truth, or yet more of the stuff coming from government? It's difficult to tell with that lot, but certainly seems in direct contradiction to what you've put in that motion, where you claim having a massive impact on residents. The bullet point list goes on. It suggests massive disruption to locals, and of course, strike action affects hospital appointments, and that's dreadful. I'm not on strike. No one here is on strike. So that personal attack was not necessary. But we do understand that it affects hospitals.
No one's made a personal attack on anybody in this room at all.
You said that we were supporting the strike action. I haven't said I am. I'm just reading off my sheet.
I didn't say that about this group.
Oh, well, I'll take that back then, because I don't wish to offend the gentleman. Okay. Well,
Thank you,
do think it was a
Councillor.
little
Can we
bit-
keep the emotion down?
Right.
Both of you.
Okay. So we understand the effects on schools and exams and stuff. Of course, that's unbelievable. That's why trade union members do not take strike action lightly. The last nationally coordinated strike of teachers was over 10 years ago in 2011. And to suggest that we take that lightly is ridiculous, considering what you've put us through over the last 10 years as a government. Suggest that the actions of the RMT will cause hospital appointments to be missed is true and is sadly true. But compared to the 6 million people in the UK currently awaiting operations, average ambulance response times for heart attacks are almost 40 minutes, and the worst A&E waiting times on record since records began, with 13,000 people waiting 12 hours in A&E over Christmas, right? Then the impact of 3 short days of strike is minor in comparison, although regrettable. No, yes, in comparison. Maybe with this shambolic record, we should be writing to the letter to the Tory government about the devastating impact on residents' lives from their cuts, rather than attacking working people for striking to protect their pay in a cost of living crisis. Finally, we call on the government to join the discussion and move this forward. Amendments that you lot hopefully are likely to accept if your real aim is to help our residents. So, to be honest, a few other things I wanted to point out. Most GCSE students that I had any dealing with were affected more by not being able to get home from half-term holidays because of the shambles of opening the airports without enough baggage handlers.
30 seconds.
So to talk about airport people going on strike is ridiculous. To talk about ferry drivers, unfortunately, is ridiculous because most of them, people think it's P&O, were all made redundant and replaced with temporary workers with no conditions. What are people meant to do in these circumstances? That's what I'd ask you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Robinson, do you accept the amendment? Anybody else wish to speak? Oh,
We won't accept that amendment as it was now. We need government taken out of that. The government are not involved in these negotiations. And so, yeah, rail companies, we're happy with that. And the wording is absolutely fine, but we won't accept government actually being in there.
Councillor Thomas and Councillor Nolan. Councillor Thomas, you indicated?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This political point scoring is not good use of our time, especially at this time of night when our concentration is suspect. Councillor Robinson, this motion is not worthy of you. Nobody strikes lightly. As employers of public sector staff, whose unions may very well have to face a difficult decision to take industrial action at some stage, your motion could be seen as intimidating. Councillor Walker, I understand why you might wish to involve the government, but this is not going to help because, let's face it, they're all going to be very busy for the next few months getting to grips with their new jobs. I now move under Standing Order 14.10C with respect to both the amendment and the main motion that we proceed to the next item of business. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I follow that? I'm not quite sure. And I just would like to ask on a point of order, if a proposal has been put to move next business, do we have to deal with that before anything else?
It's up to you. Do you want to? Do you think they've debated it enough?
I think they have.
If you think that the debate has gone on long enough, then you can take a vote on the motion, on the amendment.
Yeah. I asked Councillor Robinson whether he accepted it.
First of all, we need, if you want to say that
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I believe Councillor Way is willing to second the motion I've just moved. Thank you.
That's what I was going to, yeah. We need now to vote on that amendment. So all those in favour of the amendment?
The debate then. So I didn't realise that. I would like to. I think Councillor Mallender wishes to speak on the amendment, but I believe we have another motion of procedure which needs seconding, and then perhaps we need to vote on that, because then well, I don't believe that person was given an opportunity to speak.
If a motion to proceed to the next item of business is seconded, Councillor Thomas, you have a seconder in Councillor Way, and the Mayor thinks the item has been sufficiently discussed, the Mayor will give the mover of the original motion a right of reply and then put the procedural motion to the vote. So we're on a motion to amend, to make an amendment. So, Madam Mayor, if you feel that the debate has continued enough on the amendment, please, you would ask the proposer of the amendment, Councillor Walker, to make a right response and then go straight to the vote, and then ask the proposer of the original motion, if that vote is not carried, to then go to the vote on that. Okay? So, do you understand? Yeah.
I think Councillor Mallender wanted to speak to the amendment. Is that right?
So you're either taking a decision to continue the debate on the amendment, or you're going to take a decision that you feel that there's been enough debate on the amendment already. Okay, so if you want to continue to Councillor Mallender, you're just going
to give Councillor Mallender the opportunity because she indicated.
Okay.
And others want to speak. Others want to speak.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I understand I'm speaking on the amendment.
The amendment.
Thank you very much. Okay, so briefly to say, yes, I was supporting the amendment. There's various bits coming from around the room about the inclusion of government and rail companies along with the unions in an effort to resolve the industrial dispute. To the inclusion of the rail companies, obviously that's the thing that will have to happen. The rail companies around the country. Would anybody like to guess how many train operating companies there are? About 22. 22. There's a lot of them. You may not realise that. There's a lot involved in the discussions, and they have to be involved. The ones that principally affect our residents, the ones affecting our residents, where the lines run through Bingham, Radcliffe-on-Trent, and so on, is East Midlands Rail, a company owned by Balio, who hold the. It was a franchise. It's not at the moment. It is currently operated under direct award. The direct awards are put in place at the discretion of the Secretary of State for Transport. Hence the need for the inclusion of government in these discussions, which is why I'm suggesting that we accept the motion as it is, because you do need to include the unions, the rail companies like East Midlands Rail, and government, because the Secretary of State is the one who makes the decision on the direct awards, which are currently supporting the rail industry in many parts of the country. There's a whole slew of new things coming forward and a whole load of new legislation coming forward at some point about the introduction of Great British Rail. But at the moment, government does have a role to play through the Secretary of State, and that's why they need to be included at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Councillor Jones, because I don't think your party's had a chance to speak, and after that we'll go into the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I regret that we're in this situation because I think the original motion was pretty unbalanced. It fails to mention strikes by barristers, which equally inconvenience the public, and threaten likely strikes coming from pay claims by doctors and nurses. That these clearly will cause more inconvenience than even the railways. The problem does lie with the fact in the original motion that the unions have been round the table negotiating for an agreement for a long time. The problem in this case has been mentioned and lies with the government which funds the railways. The government insists any deal must contain so-called efficiency measures, which in fact are cuts to station staff and doing away with guards on trains. The government's demands will increase risk to the safety of the public. The railway police have just reported a 63% rise in reported sexual harassment and offences on trains, and a 44% rise in the much larger number of drugs and county lines arrests, despite the fall in passenger numbers. The public expects safety on our trains. The problem lies with the government standing away, protecting its growing budget surplus for a pre-election budget cut. The government seeks fights to create an illusion of being strong and on the side of the public. Madam Mayor, the public want decent services and safety on the railway, in court and in receiving health services, not rhetoric. So I regret the original motion, and I think this slightly improves it by introducing some balance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let's vote on the amendment. So go to the vote. Do they want to go to the vote now? And then we'll vote. So we're not voting on the amendment yet. We're voting on going to the vote. I know. So,
Okay, I understand. Yeah, right.
Right, point of order.
At this point,
You allowed the debate to continue after that point, and we'd already had our hands up to talk.
This point in time,
Yeah.
we're going to vote on whether we vote on the amendment or whether we continue the debate. So all those in favour of continue.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. My motion is to move to the next item of business, not to proceed to a vote. Thank you.
well, you don't need to agree to that. So to proceed to the next item of business, you would then put the motion to the vote. You'd still put the motion to the vote.
Yeah. So yeah, what I've just said is correct.
Yeah.
Am I asking? No, I'm not putting the motion to the vote. I'm asking if they can vote on.
Yeah. So if the motion to proceed to the next business is seconded, you think it's been sufficiently discussed, then you can give the mover of the original motion. Well, we've got an amendment which causes a complication there. Then put the procedural motion to the vote. So we're going to put the procedural motion to the vote, which is that we proceed to the next business.
Rather than.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll amend what I've just said and say.
If the motion that the question be now put is seconded, the mayor thinks the item is. I think you want to and if that doesn't pass, then we'll put the.
Okay.
I think you're going to have to go back to Simon because she's. Councillors, so the motion that was put forward by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Way, was to proceed to the next item of business, which would actually move us on to the next motion without voting on this motion. Okay, so we're now going to take a vote on whether you want to move to the next item of business. Okay, if you don't accept that and you vote against that, then we come back to finish the discussion and debate on the amendment, vote,
etc. And then we go where we go with that. Okay, so we're now going to ask you to vote on whether you'd like to proceed to the next item of business.
Yes.
Mayor.
Proposal for clarification. If we do that, what happens to the original motion? Is it passed? Do we then send the letter or not? It doesn't happen at all. So just as though we never discussed this, full stop.
Okay. So we're going to vote on whether we move to the next item.
Okay, all in favour?
All in favour?
Okay. Anybody against?
Those against?
Okay.
Any abstentions?
So that wasn't carried, Madam Mayor. So we're going to continue the debate on the amendment to the motion. Okay.
All right.
And we'll try and remember who's spoken already and who hasn't.
Right. Who wishes to speak to the amendment?
No, you've spoken already.
Councillor Gaunt, you've already spoken.
Can't speak again. Why can't you speak again? You've done it already. No, you speak once on the amendments. You've got a right to reply. Okay, so continue the debate on the amendments.
So we're still debating the amendment. Does anyone wish to speak? I think Councillor Gowland indicated.
We agree. Nobody wants strikes. Nobody wants strikes, not patients, not pupils, not workers. Do you realise strikers aren't paid? So, no, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. Of course they're not. Where do you think the union gets it?
Would you speak through the mayor, please? Not across the chamber.
Right, strikers are not paid. If they're very, very lowly paid, they may get some subs from their union. Strikers are not paid. Please put that out of your minds, okay? Because that means that strikers do not remove their wage labour on a whim. Because if they do, they can't pay their mortgages. They have been working, the RMT have been working with the management to try and find a resolution to this for 2 years. But the companies wouldn't engage, probably because the government wouldn't let them. They had to withdraw their labour to try and get a change. It's always the same. No strikers choose to strike. They don't get paid. Rail workers voted 9-1 in favour of strike action on a 71% turnout, which makes you realise just how upset they were. They didn't jump the gun at the last action. It was after 2 years of discussion with industry and the ministers. Ultimately, this sort of argument is only solved by compromise on both sides. The workers are arguing against thousands of job losses and thousands of threats of compulsory redundancy. Cuts to station staff, catering, you know, when you want a cup of tea on the train, cleaning staff, you know, when you want the bins emptied, safety on the station staff to make sure you're safe on the stations at night. They want to axe critical safety staff. They want to axe engineering staff. This will mean increased risks. It will mean less infrastructure. It will mean removing guards and catering staff. The passenger watchdog Transport Focus had said there's a strong sense the ideal response to the pandemic is to see more staff rather than less. Passengers want more staff, not less. The government claim they bailed out the rail industry during the pandemic. The railways always needed money to keep it supported. The government's emergency funding arrangements and the new rail contracts have taken all the funds and actual risk out of running a rail operating company. The Department for Transport data showed that between March 2020 and April 22, train operating companies have received £300 million in management fees, which is the basis of their profits. Analysis of the train operating companies' accounts show that the new funding agreements and contracts transformed the position of the train operating companies, restoring their profits to 600 million in 2021, compared to a significantly worse position prior to the pandemic. Dividend payments remained healthy. 73.5 million declared so far in 2020 to 21, whilst the train operating companies are forecasting they're very well placed for future dividend payments in 2022. That's very nice. Meanwhile, the rail workers' livelihoods are under threat. When during the pandemic, the rail bosses have taken home £1 million pay packets, and the rail companies have made excess of £500 million a year profits. The reason the cuts are now being proposed is so the companies can continue to make profits, regardless of the consequences for passengers or staff. We have full employment and stagnant wages.
This is point of order, please. This is not about the strike. I actually said it's about the people, residents of Rushcliffe. Not about the economics of the railway. It's just completely off the subject.
I think a strike is about the economics.
Sorry, the mayor's listening. That's what I just said. I'm listening to the mayor. The point of order, please.
Mentions railways.
Can we keep to the residents of Rushcliffe? No, hang on. I don't understand why this. Okay. I'm sorry. I apologise, Mayor. This motion was brought, and frankly, it has nothing to do with Rushcliffe Borough Council. So I don't even know why we're discussing it. It has to do with our residents. So does the weather. The council cannot control this. If we're discussing this motion, we're discussing what controls the reasons for the strike. Yeah. But anyhow, we've got full employment and stagnant wages. It's a failure of the free market. Between 2010 and 2017, wages rose by 5%, dividends rose by 30%.
Point of order, Mayor. Come on, we don't want to lecture about the economics. It is about Rushcliffe residents.
Yeah, Rushcliffe residents' pay is low and stagnant. Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Well, I'm not there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure I'll be told this is irrelevant, but I am actually a Unison senior steward in my day job. It's one of the things I do, as well as working at Bulletin. And I can assure you that people on strike, and I have actually been on strike, do not get paid for the work that they don't do unless they are in very, very dire circumstances. And even then, you should see the forms you have to fill in to prove that you're in that state. Just to say that it's not just the unions, and therefore I support this amendment because the government and the rail companies must be included in it. So the pay demand by the RMT is 7%. The inflation is at 9%. Former Transport Secretary Grant calls that extreme. And yet, last year, the chief executive of the taxpayer subsidised First Group, Britain's largest train operators, received a 7% pay rise when inflation was below 1%. The Network Rail boss receives a salary of £588,000 a year. There are not any train drivers, not that the train drivers are necessarily on strike, or quite often they weren't. It was the other rail workers, many of whom are on minimum wage, which is £18,000. They can't afford to go on strike because missing a day's pay is a lot of money for those people. So people do not take this lightly. And it is the problem. The problem is that people aren't negotiating with each other and working together, like I hope this council does and has done in the past. We have worked together to put policies forward that that are good for everyone, and that should be what happens now. So I do hope that you will accept this amendment and vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Blimey. Right, well, I did have a lot to say, but I'm not going to say any of it now because I think we've moved on. Back to the motion. I do think it's a bit hypocritical to say that this is divisive and then proceed to give us an ideological lecture on every aspect of the way that the rail companies operate, the government operates, and how the unions fund or don't fund themselves. That said, we need to come to some kind of resolution. The rail companies are private organisations, whether that's right or wrong, whether you think they should have shareholders and have well-paid chief execs, it's neither here nor there. They are currently private companies. So it is for the rail companies and the unions to come together. My fear, if I were advocating for this, is that this industrial action will do more to speed up the changes that the unions are against than anything else. The rail companies must modernise. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's shown us that technology is exacerbating the slow trends that we knew that were happening before. The high streets have changed. The way we work's changed. Can you believe that even 2 years ago, we thought it was normal to drive across the borough to meetings for an hour, and now we would do it on Zoom? It was unimaginable 2 years ago that things would have changed so dramatically. The rail companies, the rail unions have to change. They have to become more efficient. They have to become more modern. I think this strike action will exacerbate the changes that they don't want to happen. I think it will increase the amount of digitalisation, automation, driverless trains, all of those things that are problematic. But that said, they have every right to take their labour away, and it is right and proper that the rail unions and the rail companies talk to each other. You're quite right. The problem I have with this motion now is it doesn't make sense. So it says, as a council, we call on the government, the rail companies and the unions to cease industrial action immediately and get back to the negotiating table to seek an agreement. The government and the rail companies are not on strike. I might be being a bit of a pedant here, but it doesn't make sense. Do we want to redraft this completely, or can we accept the sentiments? I'd be inclined to say, take government out of this, because that isn't. They need to create an environment. I fully concede that. They need to create an environment in which rail companies and the unions can freely discuss. However, if we took government out, just kept rail companies and the unions, and the end of the misery that is being caused to some of our residents, we would be able to support this amendment.
Take it out. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, if anything, lessons from history tells me that this dispute will be resolved eventually. I hope sooner than later. But both motions, the original and this amendment, I think we're losing focus. The words that are there to me, to cease this industrial action immediately and get back to the negotiation table to seek an agreement. That's where the focus should be, not a lecture on government and policy and rail. But those are the key words on both motions. And as I say, it'll be resolved eventually.
Yeah, it's strange. There's some strange things coming. There's kind of like a conflation with this strike being about modernisation, which it's not. There's three quite clear agendas. The RMT have said there's three simple demands: fair pay raise in line with inflation, no compulsory redundancies. We're not saying no redundancies, no compulsory redundancies, and protection of terms and conditions. Those are the demands. I don't understand the conflation with the modernisation kind of stuff that was coming out there. I also find it really odd that there's this fear of adding government into this motion. There's a fear of challenging government from the side of this side here. There is no government, quite right. Yeah, and so I just want to give you a quote from an actual rail worker who's read this motion and then has kind of told us what they thought. So the main issue with the motion is to call for the RMT to return to the table. We have not removed ourselves from the table. Talks took place before the strike, during the strike, and are still ongoing now. At no point has the RMT refused talks. So what is the purpose of this motion? Call us to return to a table that we're already sitting at? So of note, train operating companies and the Network Rail have consistently stated the need for permission from the DFT in the many areas of dispute. The RMT, as a result, has called for direct talks with the DFT and the Minister for Transport to resolve these issues. SHAPS has consistently refused this request, stipulating it is the companies that have control and not the DFT. However, these are lies. Legal advice from the leading QC have been obtained by the TUC, which confirms what the RMT has stated. I repeat these aims: fair pay in line with inflation, no compulsory redundancies, and the protection of current terms and conditions. It's a ridiculous motion. We're not lecturing, it's your motion. You guys own this.
Sorry, Councillor Robinson, do you want to comment on the amendment
Before we go to the vote.
before we vote?
Yep.
So I can respond to that, can't I? Watch this. Of course, the advice that has been given is by the chairman of the local Labour Party, who is, of course, a union member for, so not independent at all. Yes, yeah. Oh, it's true, it's fact. We all know the local Labour chairman was on the picket line. So how is that independent and of any value to share with us? Because in the last 10 years, this union you're talking about has actually given over £1 million to Labour. So perhaps you should have declared this at some point. There's a bit of really hypocrisy and all this. Can you just because no, she raised it. No, so you were talking about the person in there who's quoting, who's actually chairman of Labour. Okay, I'll respond to that. The motion that we want, take government out and we'll accept it the way it is. Because these are private companies and they have shareholders and they can actually make those pay awards.
So have you got a seconder for that?
Have you got a seconder for your amendment now?
To change that, yeah. So then go back to Jan. Would she accept that changing, or does she want to vote on it as it is?
Will you accept that amendment?
Just taking out the government.
Yes. So we go to a vote on their amendment?
Yes or no? No. Okay, so we're now going to vote on the amendment, and if you've left the room, please do not press.
Yes, exactly. Right. So we're now.
I don't want to. It doesn't matter. Can we have an adjournment?
Councillor,
5 minutes. 2 minutes. Give them
2 minutes. Yes.
We're just going to have 2 minutes. 2-minute adjournment.
Is everybody ready to come back? We've had the allotted time.
Half of our side on.
Will you all please take your seats? Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore?
Okay.
Oh, we've had a request for further 2 minutes. Right. We've had our time. Can we please come to order? Right. I need to go to Councillor Walker.
Are you ready? We're going to go to the vote.
No. Well, yes, I'm ready to go to the vote. I think
On your
on
what you
on that
proposed.
amendment. Yeah,
Right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And you asked for a recorded vote. Right. So we're going to have a recorded vote on the amendment.
And can I say all those who left the chamber during the debate cannot vote? And I think that was Councillor Wheeler, Councillor
Jones,
Councillor Howitt,
and Councillor Price.
Councillor Price.
This is prior to the adjournment. This was during the debate. Okay. So we're now going to go to the vote on the amendment to the motion, which has been requested to be a recorded vote. So, the Deputy Monitoring Officer is going to read out your names in order and ask you if you are voting for or against the amendment to the motion. So you're not actually voting on the motion, you're voting whether this becomes the motion that you debate. Okay?
One on.
So, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Adair. So what we're going to go to the vote on the amendment to the motion, which is not accepting it as a, you've still got to vote again after that if you're going to accept it. So this is accepting the amendment to make what's on the board the substantive motion. So, and you're going to be first up. So we're going to ask you if you're voting for or against the amendment up there. Do you need a minute? Okay. Okay, great.
Councillor Adair, can you indicate whether you're for, against, or abstaining, please?
This one, I'm voting against.
Councillor Sarah Bailey, Owen Thorpe. Councillor Matt Barney. Councillor Kevin Beardsall. Councillor Naz Begum.
For.
Councillor Abby Brennan.
Against.
Councillor Brian Bushman. Councillor Richard Butler. Councillor Neil Clark.
Against.
Councillor Tina Cummelback.
Abstain.
Councillor John Cotting.
Against.
Councillor Gary Dickman.
Against.
Councillor Andy Edevine.
Against.
Councillor Mike Gaunt.
For.
Councillor Penny Gowland. For. Councillor Benjamin Gray.
For.
Councillor Leo Healy.
Against.
Councillor Rob Inglis.
Against.
Councillor Christine Jeffries. Councillor Richard Mallender.
For.
Councillor Sue Mallender. For. Councillor Debbie Mason.
Against.
Councillor Gordon Moore.
Against.
Councillor Jenny Murray. For. Councillor Alan Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Francis Purdue Horan.
For.
Councillor Simon Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Kevin Shaw.
For.
Councillor David Sims.
Abstain.
Councillor Carys Thomas.
For.
Councillor Roger Upton.
Against.
Councillor Devinda Verdi.
Against.
Councillor Jen Walker. For. Councillor Rex Walker.
Against.
Councillor Leslie Way.
Abstain.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler.
Against because the wording doesn't make sense.
And that's it.
Thank you. The amendment wasn't carried, so we now return to the original motion.
Does anyone wish to speak on the original
Does that,
motion?
yes, does
No,
any,
I've already spoken on it.
has everybody,
So you can go to the other leaders of the other groups if
Yeah.
you'd like to speak on the original.
Councillor Jones, have you spoken on the original motion?
No. Would you like to?
Would you like to?
Yes.
It's such a rubbish motion, it's worth dragging it out because you shouldn't have introduced it in the first place. The motion is awful. It's unbalanced.
Don't forget about the time, will you?
It fails to mention the strikes by the barristers and the pay demands of doctors and nurses and the likely strikes ahead. It hides behind the inconvenience and stress of residents to propose that unions should start negotiating an agreement. On the contrary, as we know, unions have been round the table negotiating for a long time. I've already mentioned that the government's idea of efficiency is to reduce station staff and guards on trains and the risk to public safety that entails. The problem does lie with the government protecting its growing surplus, a government not increasing taxes on the mega rich, a government which insists on a small state reducing funding for public services and fragmenting them with privatisation, diverting money to profits which could have gone to frontline services. Madam Mayor, I'd be opposing this motion for the reason that the public want decent services, not risk to public safety. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mullender, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No.
No. Councillor Thomas, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor R. Mallender would like to speak if Councillor S. Mallender is not minded to. Not confused at all. Briefly to say, yes, that I will not be supporting the motion as it stands for the whole of the reasons that have been discussed, but primarily because it fails to address the concerns of the workers on this, and it also misses the point, as we said before. Government does have a role to play in this. Some of the train operating companies are operated directly by the government as operator of last resort. The government has a role to play, as does the train operating companies, as do the unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullender. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Although I only really had one speech, so this is just a recap, really, that this is absolutely a rubbish, ridiculous motion from Councillor Robinson. It's nothing to do with what we're here for, and he's wasted how much of our time now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Brennan, I don't think she
was Councillor Brennan.
Oh, we've got sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Gray
first, and Councillor Edwin.
Thank you. I believe this is a pious, pompous, and pointless motion. If the council would like to cast their minds back sometime to when we discussed the Bingham Improvement Board, there is a fantastic comment in there which actually is noted as a striking comment, and it says that arguments consume everything and nothing happens. That is the point of this motion, it seems to me. This was brought here for an argument, and if we follow the motion through, nothing will happen. Previously in this chamber, my colleagues in the Labour group were accused of student politics, and I actually think we've verged on some grown-up conversations tonight. But I really think that actually the residents of Rushcliffe are being crippled by a cost of living crisis. And if we really cared for those residents, that's what this motion would be about tonight. That's what we'd be talking about. Again, looking at this and saying, what will it achieve? If this motion passes, we're going to have a situation where the leaders of the RMT, who I believe it's given short shrift to many journalists and politicians around the country, but I imagine it will stop him in his tracks to receive this motion from Rushcliffe Borough Council, urging him to get back to the table, which no doubt he will tell us that he's still at. They're still negotiating. So I really can't see that this motion will help us at all. And of the many thousands of things we could be doing for our residents tonight and in total, passing this motion is not it, and I will be abstaining. No, I'll be voting against this motion. It's terrible. Thank you.
I think
Councillor
Edwin.
Councillor Edwin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Robinson said right at the beginning, this is not about anything to do with attacking the right to strike, and I support everybody's right to strike. But in my experience, all too often, the people that populate the top table of unions see striking as a first option and not as a last resort. And when used unwisely, strikes, as well as being hugely damaging to the public and working people, very rarely outweigh the cost imposed on the strikers in terms of lost earnings versus future gains. Madam Mayor, I was sitting my A-levels at the time of the 70s miners' strike, and I remember also the infamous Red Robbo at Longbridge, bringing the car industry to its knees. And I was a postgraduate student during the winter of discontent. I was just embarking on a career in marketing when Arthur Scargill.
I thought we were supposed to be talking about the impact on Rushcliffe residents, not past history of strike action.
Okay, I'm talking about the futility of striking and its impact on Rushcliffe.
But yes, we need to stick to Rushcliffe residents rather than
fine. So the point I would make, Madam Mayor, is that it is about Rushcliffe residents, and strikes all too often lose and not lose win, or even win-win. And a win-win situation should and can be negotiated, and that's why I support this motion.
Councillor Brennan.
Switch your mic off. Thank you. Right, can I move this on, Madam Mayor? It's been a really emotional day already, and it's looking like an emotional evening as well. So can I propose an amendment? As a council, we call on the train operators and the unions calling these strikes and causing so much misery and inconvenience to our residents, etc. So can I propose that amendment? I have it in writing. Somebody.
I'll second that.
Oh. Oh.
I know, I left it out deliberately.
Oh, sorry. We have an amendment which you can see on the screens. Perhaps Councillor Brennan would like to speak to it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as I said, as a council, I know the grammar's a bit dodgy, but it's getting late. As a council, I hope the sentiment has changed, even if the grammar is still a bit questionable. As a council, we call on the train operators and the unions calling these strikes and causing so much misery and inconvenience to our residents to cease this industrial action immediately and get back to the negotiating table to seek an agreement. Thank you.
Yeah, so if Simon's accepted it, then that's accepted. Yeah.
Right. Does anybody wish to discuss that further? Councillor Gaunt?
It's quite important. I do want to say one more thing. Like, to claim that the government don't need to be in there is ridiculous. A high-level judge, the QC, has said that it has extensive powers over what can be agreed between rail operators and the unions. Very significant contractual powers. The rail operators are not free to agree terms and conditions. I just don't know why you've taken the word government out, and I am not able to vote for a cease to. I can't ask trade union people to stop industrial action. I could ask for them. In fact, I can't even ask them to go back to the negotiating table because it suggests that they're not at the negotiating table. It doesn't make any sense because there is a negotiating table and the trade unions are already at it, and so are the rail companies. The government aren't, and that's what's holding it up. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, you indicated.
I was just like to suggest to get round the grammatical issue really that we remove the bit that says to cease this industrial action immediately, because that is not relevant to call on the train operators to cease the industrial action immediately. So if it just says, as a council, we call on the train operators and the unions calling these strikes and causing some to get back to the negotiating table to seek an agreement. So strike out the words to cease this industrial action immediately. And then it would make sense grammatically, Councillor Brennan.
Right, I'm going to go to the leaders of the other parties. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wondered if Councillor Brennan wants to take that last part as a friendly amendment. However, I'm pleased to see that this wording has been changed to the train operators, of which the government is one through the direct awards. There's other things that it is. So it does kind of get us around that. And if that gets us moving on a bit faster than some of the trains are at the moment, then that's great.
Councillor Jones, do you wish to comment?
No, thank you.
Okay, fine. Councillor Brennan, do you wish to come back?
No, thank you. Can we go to a vote?
Councillor Sims, I think you didn't. Okay, we'll go to a vote.
Go to a vote on this proposed amendment.
On this amendment that's on the screen. Do we understand that?
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to record it. No.
You can. You're okay now. You can vote
Yes,
this
you can
time
vote on this one,
because
yes.
you've debated it again since the mini break.
Right. All those in favour?
Yeah. Yeah. In favour of the amendment. Yeah. That's carried. Yeah. All those against.
All those against?
Yeah. The amendment's carried.
Right, it looks as though that amendment is carried. So now that becomes the.
Yeah. Shall we move to the vote? So,
go to the vote again.
So,
it's the substantive motion.
So that's the substantive motion. So we could just go to vote on this substantive motion unless anyone's got any burning desires to anything else.
Yeah. I suggest we probably move now to the substantive motion and go straight to the vote. All those in favour of the substantive motion?
Yeah. And what we, yeah. Okay.
All those against? The motion's carried. My word.
Right. We haven't got time to do the motion.
No, we haven't got that.
So you could propose to go to the questions and
Yeah.
we move the last motion to the next meeting. You could propose that.
Do we have to vote on that?
Yeah. Yeah, you could propose that we move to
Yes.
item that we post. Let me just find my agenda.
As time's pressing, I'm going to propose that we move to item 12, which is questions from councillors, and that the other motion regarding UNICEF's child-friendly status goes to the next meeting. Sorry, Councillor Jones. Can we have a vote on our moving to the questions?
Yeah, for, yeah.
Yeah. Vote for. In favour of going to questions? Yes. Against?
Okay, it's carried.
It's carried. So we move then to the questions from councillors. Right, Councillor Jones, I believe you wish to put a question to Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you and not thank you.
I'm sorry.
It could have been quite brief, I hope, but anyway. The climate change strategy says it will support residents, but only in applying for grants. So will this council, as other councils have, urgently establish and promote a local cost reducing scheme with a company installing solar panels to encourage residents to pay to have them installed on their homes.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, interesting question. Took a bit of time to have a look at it and what we were or weren't doing. We do already work quite closely with key public sector organisations to monitor the potential for this kind of project. We've looked at schemes like this before, and historically we supported a similar bulk buying scheme for energy suppliers run by Nottingham Energy Partnership. So we do have some experience as a council of this kind of initiative. One of the issues with this is that the installation of such solar panels is usually fully paid for by the residents rather than the council, so the council is not involved in the transaction. As a result, they are most often benefiting those people that would have gone ahead and bought the solar panels anyway, and they don't address the issues of fuel poverty or support those most in need, which is what we're prioritising in terms of our energy efficiency measures at the moment. So unlike, for example, LAD 2 and 3, which have been enormously successful in East Leek, where we've been focusing on properties with poor thermal efficiency. So we're prioritising those at the moment. However, we will commit to continuing to investigate these opportunities, and I am aware that officers have already been in touch with Midlands Energy Hub and Nottingham Energy Partnership to explore if any companies that are working in the borough wish to progress some kind of initiative along these lines that we can link into, subject to due diligence and so on. But we are watching with interest and are open to further discussions about whether such a scheme might be implemented.
Councillor Jones, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And I do appreciate the measures that you talked about for people in fuel poverty. But the fact is that several other councils, such as those in Kent, Swindon, Cambridge, Suffolk, Wiltshire, have made arrangements with assessed companies interested in local volume services to provide reduced cost installations to paying residents. It's a no-brainer, and this council should not be behind.
Here?
Will you get on with promoting rooftop microgeneration? Yes or no?
Councillor Brennan.
That's a second question, not a supplementary question, I would suggest. But as I say, we are looking at these, we keep a watch over these, and if we identify an appropriate project that we think will provide value for money, we do the due diligence on it, then we're interested in negotiating and discussing.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Mullender, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As to Councillor Inglis, why, when it's the council policy to minimise use of weed killer, has the council been spraying glyphosates in Bridgeford Park and on the Hook, resulting in strips of dead grasses and other wild plants up to 2 feet wide alongside paths, fencing and adjacent children's play areas?
Councillor Inglis.
Okay. Well, thank you for raising this incident, Councillor Mullender, for an explanation. It's something we're all saddened and we're disappointed to learn. In fact, angry would be more appropriate, following all the work and promoting and trying to establish these important sites. However, I understand this was a one-off. It was a case of human error when a member of the grounds maintenance team, who was new to managing these spaces, unfortunately operated from outdated information. This has now been rectified and all staff are aware, and new approaches and a commitment to managing these sites in an environmentally sensitive manner. In light of the previous council motion, the council over the last year has significantly reduced the use of weed killer from spraying 8 times over some season down to 2, and only a small number of very specific sites need localised weed management. In addition to this, Streetwise have invested in a mechanical path edge cutter, which would reduce the need for any weed spraying on park edges, on footpaths and park edges. In preparation for Streetwise returning in-house on the 1st of September, we are designing specific site management plans for all our parks and nature sites. These are being developed with input from services across the council and with the expertise of horticulturists in the grounds maintenance division.
This will result in further gains in development and sustainability in all our environmental management practice. I'm assured it will not happen again, and it must not happen again.
Councillor Mullin, do you have a supplementary?
Please. My supplementary is different from my original, so I'll have to, because you've answered my supplementary. I would just like to ask why it is that the public haven't been told that it was a mistake and that Rushcliffe Borough Council are very sorry about it, because that would help. And I think we should all admit to our mistakes occasionally.
Okay. I certainly wasn't aware that an apology has not been given, but I'm quite happy to give an apology now. And I say things are in place now, so it won't happen again, and we can ensure that.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Having gone to the questions, that concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all very much for attending. I'm sorry it's been a bit of a trial.